Hello, my name is Edith Villanueva, and today we will be talking about the social self. Understanding each other is not easy because humans are very different from each other, but social psychology still wants to answer the questions of who we are when we are alone and who we are when we are with others because behaviors might change. And because of that, people are always trying to explain to themselves why people do the things that they do. We will be talking about the self in a social world, self-esteem, attributions, self-awareness, and self-presentation. Self-concept answers to the questions of who am I? Uh, I remember one of my social psychology classes a couple years ago. We had to write who am I? And then we have to give 5 different answers. The answers were kind of like who am I? I'm a student, I'm a woman, a wife or girlfriend or whatever. And all those 5 answers were part of who am I. So it's not only just one answer. So that's because our self-concepts is our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So, and like we mentioned before, the self that people sometimes show in social situations is not always the same self they present when they are alone. The most basic thing that comes to my mind is kind of like when people pick their nose. They're not going to do it in front of everyone else, and they might do it alone, which I hope you don't. And if you do, wash your hands after. So the self can be modified dependent on the needs you have. For example, if like being in school, you have to act a certain way. Like I remember when I went to school, we were not allowed to chew gum. So if you didn't want to get in trouble, you just won't do that while you were in class. But then once you were out of that place, you could do it freely, knowing that you wouldn't get in trouble. So that was one thing that we had to change for a moment, but then we could do it. Also, humans are always comparing themselves to others, which can be good, but that can be bad as well because we're not living all the same situations, and some people might be better than others. For example, right now me, I'm in school trying to get my master's, I'm working, and most of my cousins, for example, are married. I'm not. So if I compare myself to that, I might feel depressed because I'm not where they are. But at the same time, my circumstances are different because none of them are trying to get a master's degree. So there are differences there. So if we just pay attention to the negatives, we might become depressed. Self schemes are maps, mental maps that helps us organize our worlds. For example, and when I went to school, the boards where my teachers used to write had little crosses on the background, like all over the board. So that was since first grade all the way to high school. That was my experience. So if you ask me to think about a board, like a school board, my thought is that the first picture that comes to my mind is one with little crosses in the background. So if I go to a school and didn't really pay much attention to it, and then someone asked me, hey, did that have like little crosses in the background? I might be like, sure, yes, because that's what boards look like to me. But if you ask someone else who went to a different school, they might not think the same. They might not picture the same. So if you ask them, did that board have little crosses in the background? They might say, oh no, even if it did, if they weren't paying attention, because to them, they don't have crosses. So it's what we think, what makes sense to us. If we don't have the right information available, we'll just use whatever we have in our minds. Control is something that we use where we sacrifice something today hoping to get something better tomorrow. Our past self becomes in us now, our present self, and that present self is the one who has to sacrifice something for the future self. That is, I use this example here, that instead of going out for Independence Day like everyone else did, I was at home working on my PowerPoint. So I sacrificed something, going out, having fun, because I'm hoping to get a good grade, and then that's something that's gonna take me closer to my goal, which is getting a master's degree. Our culture also has an impact on the self. For example, individualism, which would be here in the States, gives priority to personal goals over group goals. They pay more attention to what that one person is achieving. Meanwhile, in collective cultures, they give priority to what the group wants. That would be, for example, in Mexico, where we think more like, okay, if I win, we all win. If you fail, we all fail. It's more like we are together, and individuals are more like, okay, if I get that promotion, it's mine because I did it. We're going to talk about self-esteem. Self-esteem is a person's evaluation of themselves, that is their self-worth. So in a way we can see that self-esteem is kind of like a motivation for us to do something. So that's why when someone has high self-esteem, that they might be able to achieve more because they believe they can do more. It is pushing them to try and do it. So it is like all the positive and negative views that we have of ourselves. Esteem is not something that is going to stay the same forever, which would be a good thing if you have good self-esteem. But if you don't, then yeah, you might want to change that. And this can change because of our relationships, mistakes that we make, or other things. Like, for example, in relationships, like if someone that you really care for breaks up with you, that might make you feel like you were not like good enough. So that might change your good self-esteem to bad, which can make you feel depressed. Conscious people are the ones who look within to make decisions. Like, for example, at work, like if everyone's always late, but you believe that it's important to be on time, you decide to still do it even though your boss is late as well every single day and nothing gets in trouble. And if that's the case, you better look for a different job because I don't think it's gonna stay open for that long. And then public self-conscious people are the ones who look at what others are doing and they try to change their behavior so that they can fit in with everyone else. There is a research that was conducted and it was about MySpace. I think there's going to be people here that are too young to know what MySpace was, so that made me feel old. But this research showed that being accepted by others around you can help you have better self-esteem, and that also they learn that people are able to change or show to others a different personality than the one they have so that others will like them. I think we can see that on our more current social media as well, and dating sites where people sometimes might try to write things that they believe others will find appealing so that they can get a better date. Like we mentioned before, humans are comparing themselves to others all the time. But to help our self-esteem, people compare themselves to someone who they believe it's not doing as well as they are, or that they are doing worse, and that is downward social comparison. One example of that would be like, let's say, okay, I'm upset because I didn't get a raise at work, but this other person has been working here way longer than me and he hasn't gotten a raise in like such a long time. So that will make me feel better because even though I'm not getting more money, I know that this person who's been working here even longer than me is not getting more money either. We don't always compare ourselves to others. We might also do that to ourselves in a different stage of our lives. So we can look at the past and compare where we are now compared to where we were like 5 years ago. Attribution theory is a way in which people explain others' behavior. Behavior can be attributed to internal characteristics or external. Internal is when we judge what someone does thinking, okay, that's because that's who they are, or external is because we think, okay, this happened, but it might be because of the situation. Like, if someone's late and I think, okay, this person's late because she doesn't care, she doesn't respect others people's time, then that would be internal, because I'm saying she's late just because that's who she is. But if instead of that I think, okay, this person is late, might be because there was a lot of traffic, maybe something happened to her car, then I'm thinking about what's happening around her, something that she can really control. So that would be external situations. Folk conceptual theory shows that the behaviors of people can have different explanations, like reasons for unintended behaviors, or specific types like belief versus desire reasons. Heuristics are the strategy that helps us make fast judgments, make fast decisions, because we have very busy lives. Sometimes we don't have the time to just sit and think about something. Sometimes we have to react fast. For example, if you see a spider, okay, so we know that spiders might be poisonous, so that's where heuristics kick in and say, okay, don't touch it. But even if a biologist tells you it's okay to touch it, it's safe, don't touch the spider, okay? Also, heuristics can be incorrect because not always the most accessible information can be correct. Sometimes it can be wrong. We use heuristics all the time, and here there was a research that showed that sometimes if there's a bad review about a brand, but we are familiar with this brand and we think it's good, we won't really pay attention to the bad review because in our mind that's a good brand. So we might think, okay, this person is just mad because this reason or some other reason. But if we don't really know much about the brand at all and someone says, okay, it's bad, we are more likely to believe them because we don't have heuristics available that is going to tell us, okay, yes, it is, in my mind, it is bad, or it is good. We are not always just sitting and thinking about ourselves because we have like so many things going around us that our attention goes to so many different things in our life. But if there's a person who does that and is always just paying attention to themselves, they might get depressed because then you are paying attention to all your mistakes, you might be paying attention to all your flaws, instead of just watching the world around you, you become like the entire world. So it's like looking at yourself with a microscope. You will, everything, even like little mistakes might seem bigger than they are. Self-awareness can help someone have better self-control, which we already talked about, but the self-awareness, it is what's going to help us achieve that self-control. There is also something called ionic process, which proves that the harder that someone tries to, for example, stop a thought, the more likely they are to fail. This makes me think of someone with anxiety that is trying to stop thinking about something. They always say like, okay, don't try to make yourself stop a thought. Like instead of that, just try to distract yourself with something else, because if you are thinking about stopping that, then you are more likely to fail at doing so. Individuals also have mechanisms to stop some behavior according to what the situation demands. For example, you can go to church and take a nap because that's not what the situation requires of you. It requires for you to pay attention. High self-monitors try to learn as much as possible from others and their situation, and low self-monitors stick to their own beliefs and ideas. So high self-monitors are usually the people that are like the most because they try to fit in with the group and do what the group think is right. As we have said before now many times, people can change their behavior according to the situation, and then there's different tactics that people can use for that. One of them is handicapping, which is creating excuses for future failure. That is, for example, when I was in school, like high school, my school had this like some sport events where the entire school had to be part of it. I'm not good in sports. So every time we were there, I would always make up an excuse like, oh yeah, I hurt my knee, even though it wasn't true because I was like, okay, if I'm horrible, I can say, okay, it was because of my knee, I told you before. And if I did good, then I'll be like, okay, I did this in spite of my injury. So I already had an excuse, even though I didn't know if I was gonna be good or bad, probably bad, but the excuse was there. People are pretty good at claiming success, but not so good when they fail at something. When they fail, they usually like to blame that on the circumstances and not on themselves, but when they do something right, then it's like, okay, it was because of me. It's because I'm smart, not because of whatever was happening around me. Also, people like to be around people that they think are successful so that they look good because it's like, okay, so this person's successful and I'm with them, so others are gonna think that they are my friend because I am just as successful as them. Strategic self-presentation is when people change their behavior to attain a goal. There is different kinds in which people can do that. One, for example, is just if this individual wants to be like, then there's self-promotions where their actions are inspired because they want to attain a goal. For example, a job interview where people just present themselves as being sometimes better than what we are because we want the interviewer to think, okay, this person has the qualities that I'm looking for. And then there's self-verification, which is a desire to be seen the way a person sees him or herself. This is like, maybe I think I'm a friendly person, so I want everyone to think that I'm friendly. By wanting to answer the questions of who am I and how can I explain myself and others, social psychologists have discovered that humans are not just the self, that we are also social animals. And that describes our roles as like student, family member, friend. Attribution theory helps us understand how humans interpret others' behaviors even when individuals are prone to making mistakes. And one of those mistakes is a fundamental attribution error. Culture can be overlooked when we think about behavior, but it is important to remember that it has a big influence in how people act and perceive each other. Help understand how people make sense of human interactions. Research has shown that heuristics are not always a good source of information since they can fail us. But people still use them. How can heuristics lead to biases? Can they help us make better social judgments? Social comparisons are almost inevitable, and they can be healthy, but they can also be unhealthy. It all depends on the person who we are comparing ourselves to. So we know by now that humans are always comparing themselves. But does this action move us away from God? Because we're comparing ourselves to other humans instead of trying to be like Him. So since comparisons are usually spontaneous, can we stop comparing ourselves to others?